3:17 a.m. An unscheduled bus arrives outside my house. I'm a middle-aged man who lives on the outskirts of Parbold. My house sits alone on a snaking country lane, and a bus shelter stands on the opposite side of the road. I can see it clearly from my bedroom window. It's rather handy, actually. I never miss the morning coach to work. Moreover, I've memorised the schedule. I was bewildered when I first noticed the 3:17 a.m. bus on Saturday the 14th of October. I'm a light sleeper, so I was easily woken by the huffing sound of air pressing brakes. I twisted my body around, propped myself on my knees, and gingerly inched the curtains open. The old lamppost on my road illuminated a grey, non-branded, single-decker bus. There was no interior lighting, no driver or passengers. Bizarre. Buses don't arrive at that time in the morning. Not in this country. Not in any town or city I know, anyway. Still, I assumed, as any person would, that times were changing. It seemed like a good idea. A bus for those who've missed the last train home after a night out, perhaps. Of course, that didn't entirely make sense, because very few people use my bus stop. It's a 10-minute walk from here to anywhere. Doubting my memory, I checked the schedule. But I was right. There was a bus at 11:07 p.m. on Friday evening, and there shouldn't have been another one until 6:05 a.m. on Saturday morning. I watched the vehicle pull away and considered that it might not be a public bus. It could be a hired coach, I thought. That seemed like a reasonable explanation, so I put the ominous bus out of my mind and went back to sleep. However, it returned the next morning, and it continued to do so for weeks. I continuously checked the schedule, but there was still no mention of a 3:17 a.m. bus. I called the council, and they assured me that it wasn't a public vehicle. They told me that I could contact the local authorities to report any suspicious activity. So, I rang the police. They didn't care. They passed me over to some civil department with a forgettable name, and that department passed me over to another department. Nobody was concerned. Everybody wanted me to tire of the whole thing. They wanted me to quit bothering them. And I obliged, but I didn't give up on my quest for an answer. I started making notes. The bus always arrived at exactly 3:17 a.m. It would linger for approximately 30 seconds. Nobody ever boarded or departed the vehicle. I took a photo of it and posted it on various forums. Nobody identified the origin of the grey faceless bus, but one comment did stand out. A user told me that I should sell my house and move. They said that the bus was there for me. Most importantly, they said that I shouldn't, under any circumstances, board it. That seemed like a rather obvious piece of advice. I wasn't planning on boarding an unlisted coach in the pitch black hours of the morning. And then, one night, everything changed. The bus arrived on time, 3:17 a.m. I knelt on my bed and peeked at it through the curtains. Something was different. My ears pricked. Once the vehicle rolled to a complete stop, I understood why. Somebody on the bus was screaming. My body trembled. I didn't know what to do. Silence followed the wail, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. I watched the bus and waited. Minutes passed. When I finally peeled my eyes from the road to check my phone, it was 3:29 a.m. The vehicle hadn't left. The world outside was empty. All living things had wisely fled the scene. I reattached myself to reality and started dialing 999, but the call kept failing, and I noticed that I had no signal. Unusual. I'm not exactly in the sticks. Sweating fearfully, I got up to turn on my bedroom light. No power. I flicked the switch back and forth. Nothing. And as I tested light switches throughout the house, I found that none of them worked. I was about to head to the fuse box, but I looked out of my living room window to see a blackened world. The lamppost was unlit. Something must have knocked over a power line, I thought. That was when I finally understood, for the first time in a decade of solitary living, that I was truly isolated. I had no neighbours, no friends, no family. The gravity of the situation dawned on me. I would have to leave the house. My self-preservation instinct was to stay indoors, but I wouldn't ignore the disembodied scream that echoed through the night. How would I have been able to live with myself? Armed with a winter coat, a wind-up torch, and good intentions, I bravely ventured into the night. As I uneasily strolled down my front path, I cast the torchlight onto the other side of the road. It revealed the grey stationary bus. There were no signs of life. Such silence that I could hear my heartbeat in my eardrums. I swung my creaky gate open and began to cross the street, futilely attempting to steady my quaking knees. My torch wobbled, so I clasped my wrist with my free hand, and then I shone the light into the windows of the parked vehicle. There was definitely no driver, but it was an elevated coach, so I couldn't see whether there were any passengers. I skirted around the vehicle, summoning the courage to enter it. When I reached the door, I stood still, trying to control my breathing. I eyed the entryway for what seemed to be an eternity, and then I felt my entire body clench. The door opened. My torchlight still didn't reveal a driver. I couldn't see or hear anyone. I thought, for a brief moment, of that internet stranger who told me not to board the bus, but the scream still rang in my head. My gut told me that somebody was in danger. I stepped onto the vehicle and climbed the initial steps, gulping as the door closed. I held the torch before me, as if wielding a weapon, and I gradually ascended the next set of stairs to the raised passenger platform. I spent several seconds on each step, savouring what I believed might be my final moments on Earth. Then, I lit the passenger area before me. I half expected to see nothing, but a young girl was sitting on the middle seat of the back row. Her head was in her palms. She was crying. Are you okay? I asked, timidly. No answer, so I started to walk forwards. Once I was standing only a few yards in front of her, I knelt onto the floor of the aisle. Are you okay? I asked a second time. The girl's sobbing immediately ceased, but she didn't lift her head from her hands. You shouldn't have boarded the bus, she replied. My torch died. I furiously wound the lever at the side, but the light didn't return. Then came the sound of squeaking, groaning plastic. The bus door was opening. Shivering, I slowly turned my head to face the front of the vehicle. I could hear low, guttural breathing. It was followed by clunking footsteps. Dim moonlight shone through the windscreen, but it was sufficient to display the outline of a hulking figure on the stairs. A black spectre with drooping limbs started moving towards us. He hunched forwards, and his elongated arms began to drag along the tops of the seats. He was too tall and too wide to fit in the aisle. Wide-eyed, I looked at the girl. She had finally lifted her head from her palms. I could barely see her, barely hear her. "This is my stop," she whispered. "I was really hoping you wouldn't board. I wanted more time." Before I comprehended what was happening, an icy limb coiled around my ankle. It tugged, and I fell. My nose connected with the firm floor, and I heard something crack. Ah! Certain of my nearing doom, I looked up, but the demonic creature was wrapping its other arm-like limb around the girl's neck. It hoisted her from her seat, and she screeched as she was lifted towards the indistinguishable figure. I don't know what happened in the darkness, but I'll never forget the sound her body made as it was consumed by the black entity. The crunch of a wriggling celery stick. I had almost entirely lost my mind, but some vestige of survival instinct persisted. I twisted onto my back and looked down at my constricted ankle. With my free foot, I stamped on the creature's limb. Stamped with all my will and might. The demon, which was devouring the poor girl, unleashed an inhuman wail. It pierced my ears and shattered every window on the bus. The limb retracted from my ankle and returned to the shadowy being. I seized my opportunity. Catapulting to my feet, I spun around and lunged for the glassless back window of the bus. Clinging to the frame of the broken pane, I took one last look at the dark entity that was hurtling towards me. Gasping, I dropped to the road below, and I sprinted away. Adrenaline powered my aching legs. No turning, no stopping, only running. At the speed I travelled, it took me mere minutes to reach the warm and welcoming lights of civilization, and I joyously looked at my phone to see that I had service. I booked a taxi to Manchester. Then I took the first train to London. For the past couple of weeks, I've been living in a hotel. I took the advice of that online stranger. I moved away, far away. I may even leave the country. I don't go outside at night, and I certainly don't look out of the window after 3 a.m.